Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's Q&A. Just to let you know, this is now Thursday night, so I'm not sure when I'll get this up, hopefully as soon as it's done. But if you have any questions that are coming in after Thursday at 7 p.m., then please definitely repost next week because I would have missed them. But anyway, let's jump into the Q&As. First up, Marcus Eli Hastrup had a problem that is, it hurts my heart because I just went through the same thing. He said he bought a PVM 20L5, but it was damaged during shipping, although he was able to receive a full refund for both the screen and the shipping costs, but he feels bad because the seller probably had to eat the costs. So I will share very quickly a similar story so that everybody could learn from my mistakes and possibly the seller of Marcus's monitor that got damaged. Last year, I sold a monitor, had it shipped really well, or packed really well. I have pictures of the packing and all that stuff. Had it shipped, and I was always told, Pat even told me, careful coming in and out of New York, wherever the shipping docks there, they're probably extra harsh for whatever reason. Maybe there's a big space that you need to, dump the packages in or something. So we packed it extra good. I don't think we used 2 boxes though. That was Pat's trick, is you basically pack it as good as you can with bubble wrap and foam, box it up, then add more foam and more bubble wrap and put a second box. We didn't do that, and I think that's the secret. But I shipped it freight shipping or something and used Insure Ship to insure the package. So there was a small miscommunication. I shipped it. It arrived damaged. I thought the receiver was going to contact the insurance place. The receiver thought I was. Then they went on vacation. So next thing you know, 2 months go by, and hey, did you ever hear back from the insurance place? So my fault. The one thing I will 100% take fault for, it was, I think it was early June before I was able to actually contact Insure Ship. They were cool about that. That they understood. But from that moment on, they were a nightmare. They did everything you could possibly do to get out of paying the ship or the insurance that I paid for. So a ton of email correspondences, sent them all the pictures, the before shipping, after it was arrived, pictures of the boxes, and they kept saying, all right, we'll get back to you, and never did. So I'd have to hunt them down, try to call them, try to email them. Sometimes they would respond, sometimes they wouldn't. I ended up just trying to get an invoice to get it fixed. So I just got a letter in the mail just a few hours ago that said they've closed the case, that they just gave up on it. So they just kept going until I gave up pretty much and never paid out the claim, which was like $600. It wasn't like I'm going after thousands here. So let that be a lesson to everybody. Hopefully whoever shipped your monitor, Marcus, was able to use something better. Like, I think UPS is usually fairly good at that, depending, but it's been a long time since I've had to make a UPS claim, so I don't really know. But let that be a lesson. Double box it, no matter what the monitor might be. And on top of that, don't use Insure Ship. Use something else. The one thing that Pat recommended was if you ship through a UPS store and you tell them to double box it, and then you tell them to insure it, they'll do a great job, because if anything gets messed up, that comes out of the budget of that store, not the UPS budget like the global budget. So they tend to be extra careful because they don't want to have to eat that cost. I don't know. I've had hit or miss at those UPS store type places. I've had them do ridiculously good jobs, like way better than I would have ever asked anybody to do. And I had them put a guitar in a box and ship it like that. So the entire time the guitar was in shipping, it was flopping around inside the box. No bubble wrap, nothing. Luckily, the FedEx store, that was a FedEx store, that paid out the full claim immediately, because that's just stupid. So sorry to open this with a rant. I just wanted to share my experience so others could learn from it. I posted on Twitter, and I hate that. I hate when people do that. Instead of going to customer service, they just tweet, hoping that, if they make a public stink, they'll get something. There's one YouTuber that does it all the time, and it drives me nuts. I don't even think he dials the 800 number or sends an email. I think he just tweets publicly. But after a year of fighting back and forth, and I was also, not to sound like a wimp, but I was also not in the mood to deal with a bunch of people saying, oh, you're just crying because you're looking for something for free or publicly. But I just decided to tweet about it because I wanted everybody to know what that experience was like. Now I'm ranting again on the Q&As. So sorry to waste anybody's time that didn't care or already knew. I just felt it was kind of important because it's just impossible to be able to drive and get these CRTs. So sometimes you're going to have to ship them. And I just felt like sharing my experience with what to do and what not to do is probably a help for anybody that needs to ship it. So sorry for the rant, and I will move along. Itsumi Mario asked if it's safe to leave your OSSC switched on all the time. Um, I've left it on for weeks by accident, and it never got too hot. And it's in a cabinet, so it's in a cabinet with no back to it, so it's not in like a sealed cabinet. But I just forgot to turn it off one night, and then did a bunch of other stuff, got busy, came back, and when I opened the door of the cabinet, I saw the glow of the OSSC LED screen, and went, uh-oh. But it didn't get too hot. It felt like normal temperature, and it worked fine. So my guess would be it's totally fine to leave it on 24/7. But all electronics have a finite lifespan, and on top of that, heating and cooling will also wear down components faster. So like a general electronic rule of thumb, like for PCs, right? I tell all my friends who have PCs, the worst thing you could do is turn it on and off all the time. So I'm going to check my email, let me turn it on. All right, I'm done, off. Walk away, come back, 2 minutes later, I forgot to check this. That constant hot and cold is bad for all electronics. But things like turning it on, playing your game, turning it off, that's normal wear and tear. So that's, on both sides of that, leaving it on 24/7 will wear down those electronic components faster than if you only turn it on when you use it. And try not to toggle on and off constantly all the time. Just, it happens to me a lot because I end up doing a lot of testing where it's like, okay, power it off, change cables, power it back on. So I'm probably wearing my main one out a lot. So those are just basic electronics tips, but I think you should be safe. But, if it's one of those things where if you're turning your whole setup off at the end of the night, take the time to do it. But if it's, if you're going between OSSC and Xbox One and you just flip the input on your TV and want to keep gaming, I wouldn't worry about that at all. So, hope those are decent tips. Kelly Greenidge wants to know my opinion on the Heiko FP-102 soldering station, and said he had a bad experience with the Kesker station. So, to address both of those, I've heard that Heiko station is awesome. Voltar said he loved it, suggested I buy one. I bought it, didn't work. It's Zach. You're an idiot. Send it to me, Bob. You don't know what you're doing. Send it to him. And I sent just the station to him, not the wand or the tips. He said, it works fine. You're doing something wrong. Sends it back to me. Doesn't work. Turns out I had knockoff tips. I needed original Heiko, knockoff wand, not just the tips. I needed the original wand. So sent it back to him. And these things are heavy. So, I'm adding it to other packages. He did the mod for me that allows you to use any tip you want. He tested it on his knockoff tip, sent it back to me. It still didn't work, so I shipped it back to him and never used it again. Told him, keep it. I don't want it. I've already spent more on shipping it than I did on buying it. So I had a bad experience with that, but I've heard from many people that they love that station. And I think, now Zach has 2 of those, and they work great for him. So those tend to be good, but the one thing, whenever you buy used equipment, you're going to run into stuff like that. Maybe it wasn't just the third-party tips. Maybe it was a beat-up station, and every time I shipped it, it would, wiggle it around enough in shipping where something kept falling in and out of place. Who knows? So if you're willing to spend the money on it, on that or whatever the modern version of that is, as well as official tips, great. Or if you're going to buy it used, try to find a seller that has a full kit. So it's got the wand, the tips. Even if it's only one working tip, at least when you get it, you'll know that it's working and you don't have to worry about it at all. So I've heard it's great. It's just, it's expensive, and I would just go with that tip of buying it in a package so that if there's any problem, you could just send it right back to the eBayer. About the Kesker T12, I've never heard a middle story about that thing. I've heard people rant and rave just like I did about how much they love it, or I've heard people with your exact experience with it saying it didn't work, and now Banggood is being awful about it. And there's also people that talked about the power risk using that. We'll talk about that on the next Retro Roundtable, but that's not a major concern for most people. So it's hard because I don't trust the Amazon links. I leave them up on the site for anybody that wants to chance it because returning something to Amazon is always infinitely easier. But who knows what you're going to get. Voltar talked with Banggood after he found the station and said, I want to give people a link that guarantees this one, not the same one with different guts in it. And they guaranteed him the link, but a store like Banggood guaranteeing something, it's about as good of a guarantee of me becoming a lead ballerina by the end of the week. Like it's probably not going to happen. So that's the problem with those. If you get a good one, they're so good for the price, but there's no way to know until you buy it. Most people have gotten awesome ones. Don't forget, whenever there's a problem with something, like whether it's the forums or Yelp reviews, you hear about the negative more than the positive. Most people who have gotten it have had great experiences with it, and it really stinks that you kind of get screwed over. So, it really does just come down to luck and money. Do you want to just drop the cash on a brand new Hacko setup, knowing that you're going to get quality, knowing that the Hacko warranties are awesome, you don't have to deal with any of that crap? Or are you like me, that I would rather just take a gamble on that? And that's been hit or miss. That desoldering iron that was just the gun only, I'm convinced there was still something wrong with that one because there's just no way that should have performed as bad as it did. And then the other one that I got, the full station with the separate gun, has been amazing. And it was $110. So, for me personally, it's worth the risk of buying the knockoffs for stuff like that. Because even if I had to buy two, it's still cheaper than just one of the originals. So you kind of have to make your own decision on that one. But sorry you ended up having a bad experience with it. And if you want the Hacko, just kind of buy it pre-tested altogether. Next, both Firebrand X and Doomleg were following up on the power supply discussion we've been having. So first, Doomleg said the retro game supply PSUs are CE certified. Does it need to be UL, or is that just another name for it? So that's totally my fault. Saying UL certified is like saying Band-Aid or Q-Tip. That's the brand. It's really safety certification. And I think there's one more CSA, CSE, whatever, but there's at least those three, probably one more. So as long as it has that sticker on it, that's the key. So we ran into this problem in the medical field where we bought the same power supply that we have always bought on, the 50,000 computers that we'd shipped or something. We delivered them to a hospital, and 3 weeks later, I had to get on a plane and fly to Sweden to replace all of the PSUs because they didn't have the right sticker on it. So that's just, the medical field's way more strict with that, but that just goes to show you that, power nerds around the world know that you need that sticker on there. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that came down the factory line to the same testing specifications. And of course, a sticker isn't a guarantee either, but it's a guarantee that company is definitely going out of business if they have more than a handful of complaints about that. Because that's just, the same company that makes the stuff that you and I use on a video game would also make the medical grade ones, make military grade. So once that sticker's on, even companies that normally wouldn't take things so seriously, that is taken seriously. At least I hope it still is. It's been a few years since I did that. So when I received the Retro Game Supply PSU, it definitely didn't have any sticker on it. So that's just something to keep in mind, is if they could list anything all they want on the website, it doesn't really count as certified unless there's a sticker on it. I know we're talking semantics here, but for all the reasons I just explained, it kind of falls into place. And also, Firebrand X said that he's doing more research on the Triad power supplies, and everything that he's found shows that they should be perfect. I'm going to be doing some more testing this week, so I'll follow up again, but they should be fine. The only advice I'll give on the Triads, I ordered a ton of those for testing, including one 5-volt for that one specific model Neo Geo, and they all look exactly the same. So the core graphics that I used a while back, I sent to a friend of mine, and that one was having issues. I was having some serious problems with it, didn't know what, couldn't diagnose it. So I grabbed the Triad PSU. All the boxes look the same. All the PSUs look the same. You could kind of just tell by this model number, which is also printed on it. So just grabbed this, grabbed the core graphics, sent it to a buddy of mine, and said, "Hey, if you have any trouble at all, let me know. I'll have it fixed." Sure enough, he has trouble, so I sent it to Jose, who found out that it was the RAM. So that wasn't ever my fault. Luckily, neither was the power supply, because I didn't even use the thing with that power supply. But he said, by the way, I tested it with my PSU, fixed it, put new RAM in it. Now I went to test it with the one that you sent, and it says 5 volts. And I went, oh crap, that would have been really bad. So luckily, it only got used once or twice with the wrong PSU. It was already broken, so it's nothing. It's as good of a situation as you could have imagined. But the point of that stupid story was that you got to make sure if you're buying a few of these, unless they're all the same, of course. If you buy all of the 3500Rs and you have 4 of them, whatever. But if you mix and match, like, do something. Put a fluorescent sticker on it, label it, tie a string to it, whatever you can, just to differentiate one from another, so you don't make the same dumb mistake that I made. But luckily, my story ended well, so that's my only suggestion about the Triads. And if there's any trouble with them at all, which I don't think there is, I'll definitely update everybody. Nick had 2 questions. First, what's the best current switchless region mod for a Model 1 VAO Japanese Mega Drive? I'm really sorry, but I've never messed with region mods. The only one that I ever even tried was from Jody Hicks, the person who does those no-cut Genesis consoles that are really awesome. He donated one as a giveaway a while back when I could still do those. So I'd maybe contact him or possibly check a forum. I hate to send you to the dark depths of a forum, but I've all the Japanese games I play, including the handful that I own, they're either on the Japanese Master System that I own, or I just bought them because I loved the box art and I play it with a ROM cart on my Genesis. So sorry about that. But the second part of your question I might be able to answer. You asked if there's an RGB bypass to fix the jail bars on the Model 1 VAO Japanese Mega Drive. So the first thing that you could do is lift the subcarrier pin. That's something that I think there's info out there. I started working on a video on that and ran into issues. I'll get back into the Genesis documentation soon. There's a few other reasons why I haven't gone back to that yet. But basically, if you lift the subcarrier signal, it disables the colors going to composite video. So composite video is pretty much useless at this point. But because of doing so, you reduce a ton of interference, and that's good enough for a lot of people. It's a little tricky. You need either an X-Acto knife or a dental pick sometimes works. And you got to heat up a tiny little pin, and as it's hot, pull it up. It feels like an operation. So if you're not comfortable with that, you might want to have somebody else look into it. But I've never tried a Model 1 VAO Genesis. However, with a lot of the Model 1s that we've tried, VA3, VA6, VA6 Japanese, if you do a full RGB bypass and you add 2 capacitors to the VDP, then it gets to the point where you're always going to have noise on any analog console, and definitely Genesis more than others because they're all problematic. But you have all of the good benefits of the RGB bypass, and it's still better than just lifting the subcarrier. So it's at the point where when playing on a CRT, I couldn't be happier with it, and I don't think I could see a difference between that and anything else. You blow that up on a 65-inch OLED screen, you still might see some interference, but way better than stock and definitely better than lifting the subcarrier. And it's my opinion that if you're gonna, especially if you have to pay somebody to do a mod, it's good to just install the triple bypass in it. You could, you have one board that does everything. You don't have to worry about all the noise and interference on that board. And then you could just do this full bypass and add the extra capacitors. The one problem we ran into, and the reason I had to put that other project on hold, was if you just do the bypass and don't add these 2 extra capacitors right on the VDP and right up to touching the pins, you get almost worse jail bars from a different source. So it looks sort of the same, but it comes from a different place. So Voltar found the fix. Jose tested a bunch of Genesis 1s, and I helped verify the testing. So between the 3 of us, I think we were able to figure it out. but I wanted to finish testing before I rewrote the documentation, and I'm working on the final version of the triple bypass right now, which performance-wise should be about the same, but installation instructions will be slightly different. So I didn't want to spend 100 hours writing all this documentation just to have to rewrite it soon. So that's why I haven't gotten back to that. I'm sorry for anybody looking to do work on their Genesis consoles. If you're waiting on me, really sorry about that, but I just want to do it right the first time and hopefully only one more time. So I guess that's a really long way of saying I don't have an answer to your question about the region mod, and I'm pretty sure either just lifting the subcarrier and doing nothing, or doing a full bypass and adding the 2 caps on the VDP would work on your VA1 Genesis to get an amazing output, but I haven't specifically tested Model 1 VAO Mega Drive yet, so it's a pretty good, pretty good gamble, I guess. P. Malevsky asked if I could do a video tour of my office, and I absolutely keep meaning to do that and just keep forgetting. I've also changed my setup at least twice since I've been in this apartment. I used to have everything wired differently, and now I got to kind of rethink the total use case of it, because while it would have worked for other people, it doesn't really work with what I've been doing. So I'll get around to that as soon as I can. Maybe an excuse to show off the new camera. I've been trying to upgrade my equipment. However, I will give you a little bit of insight into what it's like to work here. I'd grab the camera, but it's mounted in a way where I can't just like take it apart and put it back. I'd have to undo the whole thing. But I'm at a standing desk now that's only standing because it's one of those adjustable tables that's on top of a bunch of drawers, because I live in New York City and that's all the space I get. And just to give you an idea, like I am palms touching. So my palm's touching the wall with the window on it, and my other palm is touching my IKEA shelf. So just wider than me is all the space I have to work for. And I got one of those IKEA shelves with my oscilloscope, an 8-inch monitor, and it's actually a super efficient workstation that I'm kind of happy to show off on camera when I can. But it's kind of funny. I'd want to do a video on my office tour just to give an idea of what it's like to try to work from home in New York City versus anywhere else. I used to have a full room when I lived in Stamford, and but it's something I want to do and something I think would be fun, and especially if I shoot it from not just here's where I work, but showing how I have my retro consoles integrated in all of this. Because even the way I did have it, the way I do have it, I think that might be a help for people that are trying to plan their streaming setup or whatever capture thing that they need. So I'll do that soon, but thank you for reminding me. I promise I'll get on it, and if I don't have it done in a month or so, remind me again. Shoot the Core said, in my last Q&A, I mentioned purchasing long-life, high-quality capacitors when recapping a CRT, or really anything these days. He's going to be recapping his 20M4U and purchased one of Savon Pat's cap kits off of eBay. He was disappointed to discover that his eBay kits only include a dozen of the most likely to fail caps, and they're low-quality Chung brand capacitors. Does he use high-quality caps when he performs a full recap service himself? He's considering asking him to recap his PVM's chassis board, but his eBay experience has spooked me. So there's 2 parts of that. The one that I could answer that I somewhat agree with is that Pat's recapped so many of these things. I mean, this was his job for years. And in my last interview, I asked him about that, and he said he does occasionally go, especially if there's like a problematic board or a problematic monitor, he'll take his ISR meter and check every cap, and he'll have like for example, he'll take a board that he knows is good, that maybe he recapped all of them, whatever, and he'll touch the ISR meter on that, and then match it to all the caps on the new board to make sure. And he said that there's a bunch of caps that in his entire history of doing this, he's never seen gone bad. So I get that. I also would prefer the peace of mind of just changing them anyway, because it's a component that will fail at some point. I mean, all electronic components will, but... So I understand his point, and I also understand in his kits why make somebody recap every single cap when you really would only need these. And the caps that he does replace, they're either ones that always need to be replaced, or maybe sometimes, but it's a good idea to just do it. So I somewhat agree with that. The low-quality Chong brand capacitors are something that, I've heard mixed feelings about, because the people I know, like Jose, that want to do recaps on monitors, he just buys the best that you could buy, because the price difference really isn't that much, considering what it is that you're doing. If every capacitor for a 20 M2U or M4U would cost $80 with the cheap ones, or $100 with the expensive ones, I would just get the expensive ones. But there's also what's a low quality capacitor? That's so I don't know. I don't know enough about them to say, well, the Chong brand is junk. I've had capacitors and I've had components of all quality, supposed quality, do different things. So I really just don't know. If you have the ability to do this stuff yourself, and you have the patience to go through, which is very boring, by the way, to make your own cap list, and the cap list part isn't bad. It's going on DigiKey, Arrow, Mauser, and trying to match the exact capacitor to the one you're replacing. That bores me to death. So that's the thing. If you have the time to do that, I would just do that yourself, get the best. But if you just don't want to bother, you don't have the time, you don't have the skill, I think you'd be fine just sending it to Pat and letting him do his thing. I think what else you get with Pat is kind of where the money goes. How he would calibrate the cards to themselves if you send them the whole package to get done and all that stuff. So I don't know. I'll ask him the next time I talk to him. But he when I mentioned that, he kind of just seemed to blow it off like they're fine. Once I've replaced them once, I haven't had to replace them again, which might not be the best answer, but if you're concerned, I think I would kind of look into that. And I plan on doing at least one, probably two recaps myself on monitors here. Maybe I'll do a fun, I don't know if I'd call it fun, but maybe I'll do it a thing where I get a couple of friends together and we do the cap kit together. Like, I'll get in there and figure out which cap is which, and somebody else write it down, and then somebody else, maybe more than one person, jump on Arrow or DigiKey and try to find the exact link. It might actually be kind of a fun thing to do with fellow nerds on the Discord or on the Patreon stuff. But I'll follow up with that as soon as I have a chance to. And yeah, I don't know. I would be completely comfortable paying Pat to do all my things. But if you're a perfectionist, or especially if you're going to do it yourself, maybe just find the caps that you feel more comfortable using. Doomleg was asking if I knew of any wireless controller solutions for the PC Engine. He said he's combining either the Joys or the 2.4 gigahertz 8-bit do solution and with Sega Sonic Fans boards. And they work fine, but it's an expensive solution. So no, I don't know of any other solutions. If that one seems to work for you, I guess I would just stick with it. Of course, there's always the possibility of just getting an extension cord. You can get, I believe it's the same, if it's PC Engine, it should be the same as a PS2 keyboard. So I think I've gotten PS2 keyboard extension cables for a few dollars each. So I know that's not what you asked, but it's certainly a very cheap alternative. You can get a set of two delivered for under $10. So that might solve your short-term solution until you find other wireless stuff. But it just getting wireless to work right is always tricky. Getting controller converters to work right is even more tricky. So if there's a solution that works, even if it's expensive, you might want to just stick with it, or just use one wireless and one extension corded. But if I hear of anything, I'll certainly do a write-up or a post on RetroRGB's news section for it, because I love wireless controllers now. I never really played with them that much before. I always was suspicious of their performance, but even just for testing, for me, it's so easy to use those as opposed to wired. And I still, whenever I'm sitting down for like a hardcore gaming session, which is rare these days, I do absolutely use the wired solution still. I've never had a problem with the Joys, ever, but it's peace of mind, I guess. And with Genesis, I love the 3-button controller, unless 6 buttons are required, but that's kind of a thing for me too. So sorry I don't have a better solution, but definitely look into those extension cables just because of cost. Phil Welker asked, are there any interesting controller mods you know of? There's that Jaguar spinner controller you won't shut up about, but is there anything else you could think of? Well, can I tell you about a Jaguar spinner controller? Honestly, that as much as I rant about that and probably annoy everybody, that is the perfect example of a controller completely changing the experience. I've had the opposite. I bought driving controllers that I ended up just going back and using the D-pad because they were so annoying. I think I got the official Saturn one, and it felt like it worked perfect for Outrun, but worked like crap with Daytona, which is weird because you would probably think it was the opposite. But I've had a lot of controllers ruin the experience. Anytime there's analog controls, meaning not just, full left or not or off, where you could move it just a little bit, like Afterburner and stuff like that. You would want to use a PS2 gamepad with the analog sticks or something like that. Turbo, first time I bought 1943 for NES when I was a kid. It was really exciting for about 30 seconds to just be slamming on the controller. I remember thinking, wow, it's just like those kids in the commercial. And then about a minute later, I'm like, my hand hurts. Let's go get a turbo controller. But off the top of my head, no, there's nothing else that really jumps into mind of, I have to go grab this controller while playing. What I will say, without a doubt, is getting the right arcade stick, if you're into that stuff, is really important. I needed a small portable one, so I had one built for me. It's good, but it's just a small 6-button, and it's got Genesis. It's got the MC Cthulhu, which means you could do a ton of other consoles. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Saturn, Dreamcast, PC, a long list of stuff. And it's wired for the Neo Geo wiring as well. And I mean, I use that for testing. I even added an LED for lag testing. That's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. I enjoy using it, but when I got my Vulix and when I got another one built that's more of the larger style, as long as you get good buttons and a good stick, the case doesn't really matter at all. I just like it a little bit bigger so it's easier to balance on your legs and there's enough room. But I was using that little stick that I had built just for testing, and I was enjoying playing Mortal Kombat. I was enjoying, my CPS2 kit. I think it was Jose who told me, you got to get a Vulix. You're going to love it. You got to get it. And when I finally brought it home, it's this giant stick, like this, it's almost a double-sized stick, but for one person. And I sat down on the couch, and I just put in Mortal Kombat, the first one. It's my favorite fighting game. And I'm just playing it, and I'm enjoying it. And before I knew it, I was already at the second mirror match without dying. So I didn't realize I was playing better until next thing you know, I didn't die once. Normally I would have died at least once or twice up until that point. So that was like a real world learning experience. Like, wow, this just by having a really good stick made me play better and it was more comfortable. So I guess the two things that stick up in my mind right now, that the biggest differences in gameplay are getting the right arcade controller for you, in which means you probably have to try a few before you find one that's right for you. The bigger person you are, the bigger the stick you should get, though. And the Tempest one. So if I think of anything else, I'll try to remember to post something or put it in the next Q&A or something like that. But those are really just the two things that jump out at me at the moment is, the good arcade stick and the Tempest one. But it's a good question, and I will not shut up about the Tempest one. Billy Gilmore had a couple questions, and I'm going to answer them out of order just because I think it's a little easier. So the main question, can the OSSC switch between SCART and component signals on the fly? Yes, absolutely. If you have the remote, you just press the 1 button and the 2 button to switch between the inputs. Don't forget that each input could be a few different things. So SCART could be SCART, component, sync on green. I think component could be component or sync on green. So when switching between them, like if you go to number 2, you might have to press number 2 twice or something like that. But I personally would call that on the fly, and I mean, it's as easy as it could possibly get and works with the remote, so you don't even have to get up. You asked, are there viable SCART to component solutions that include audio and don't introduce lag? So in the context of using the OSSC, don't do that. You have all the inputs right there. It does the conversion. It just one large less margin for error, and it's just going to be a better experience overall. So just, the SCART to component solutions you might get might be perfect, but it's still one more PSU, one more set of cables. Every set of cable you introduce in an analog signal has the potential to reduce the quality. Maybe not noticeable, but I would just stick with that. As a general question, SCART to component solutions, none introduce lag that I know of because it's just a signal conversion. They don't change the image processing, so they should all be zero lag. Some include audio, some don't. And some process the signal very badly. I've talked about this on older Q&As. So to skip to the end, the Shiny Bow one seems to be the all-around best converter for generic use. The ones that are the knockoffs of that can be good if you have an oscilloscope. The HD retrovisions are the best, but that's almost an unfair comparison because each cable is designed specifically for each console. But overall, if you don't have to use any kind of conversion, just don't. And you mentioned you got a Duo R, which came modded for RGB, but still uses composite video as sync. So a few things about that. Composite as sync is totally fine as long as you have a fully shielded cable. If you do, and you're going into the OSSC or into something like the G-SCART switch, you'll never have any problems. The only issues you will have is if your cable's not fully shielded, you could introduce interference and jail bars into the signal. If you're going into an Extron crosspoint, that won't work, but you probably aren't, especially if you're going to the OSSC, that probably doesn't apply to you. And everything should be fine, but if you plan on continuing to use composite video, as long as you have a great cable, that should be good. For gaming, I just don't use composite video at all. And it's not like I'm being a snooty elitist. I would never use it for gaming, only for testing. So I make sure to cut that trace and run only C-Sync to the DIN, so I just don't even have to worry about it. The last thing I'll mention is, depending where you got your Duo R from, you might want to open it up and take a few pictures of the mod itself. It should be very easy to open. It shouldn't be dangerous. Because there were a few, not just one, there were a few notorious modders out there that I'm shocked the consoles worked at all, let alone continued to work. So you really should just get a good sense. Even if it's working now and you don't want to mess with it, you should open it up just to get a sense of what you have. You should also take very good pictures of the capacitors, like a few problematic areas, especially around the audio circuit. Because even if even if the RGB mod was clean and the capacitor replacement was done, did they clean up any of the existing capacitor stuff? So I'm not sure how much you know about this. So I'll do the short version. All Duos need all the capacitors changed at some point. They leak out, and not only will it stop working, but the fluid that leaks out destroys the traces on the motherboard. And sometimes you have to rewire the traces, and sometimes, depending on where it's at, it may be unfixable unless you have a really, really talented modder that can trace everything out. So even if you got it from the best modder on the planet, still open it up and take pictures just for your own peace of mind. Even if it's flawless, that means you just spent 5 minutes knowing that, yeah, it's awesome. But definitely do that, because Duo Rs are very cool consoles, and you do not want to end up with one, even if the mods were all done good, if there's still capacitor fluid on the traces, they'll eventually die as if the cap replacement wasn't done at all. So definitely take it apart, get some good pictures, make sure the mod was done well, and hopefully it is, because there's a lot of, for all the talk of bad mod work, there are more good modders out there than bad. You just don't hear about them because there's no point, I paid somebody to do something that did a phenomenal job, great. There's no reason to talk about it. So that's why you hear about the bad more than the good. For your own peace of mind, definitely check it out. So I think I answered all your questions, but please post again if I didn't. Well, that's it for this week's Q&A. If you have any questions at all for next time, please post on the subscribe service that you use in the latest video. So these videos go public about a month after they air to subscribers, but I always turn the comments off on YouTube because this is really focused for the subscribers as a thank you for all your support. So wherever it is that you subscribe, I believe it's YouTube's Join service, as well as Bitbacker, Subscribestar, and Patreon. I really don't care. I'm just very appreciative of any of it. Wherever it is that you subscribe, just find the latest Q&A video and post in those comments. And the only way I would miss it is if it was an accident or if it came in after I started recording. So if I missed your question, please ask it again, and I'll try to get back to it the next week. But either way, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and I love doing these Q&As. I think it's a lot of fun, and I hope it's at least a somewhat decent way to give back for the support that you all give. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.